Welcome to this urgent explainer. Look, I am absolutely thrilled to dive into this with you today because honestly, we're looking at a truly fascinating and chaotic moment in global trade. We're going to be using some exclusive intelligence from PolymerBAZAAR to dissect the massive supply-side shocks that are, well, violently repricing global polymer markets right now. If you've been watching the markets, you know something big is going down. Today, we're breaking down exactly what that is and, more importantly, why it's happening. But before we jump straight into the data, just keep in mind that this market intelligence comes straight from the latest PolymerBAZAAR briefing. They have their ear to the ground, so we're going to use their exact insights to build a really clear picture of this complex landscape. Our goal today is just to cut through all the noise and give you the direct, structured understanding you actually need.
All right, let's get into it. And, we really need to start by aggressively busting a common myth right off the bat. This is not about demand. I know, it's so easy to blame global market upheaval on shifting consumer habits or a cooling economy, right? But the intelligence we're looking at today proves this current upheaval has absolutely nothing to do with consumer demand. We have to look entirely at the supply side.
As the intelligence explicitly states, this week's market wasn't driven by demand. It was driven by tariffs, anti-dumping actions, logistics disruptions, and geopolitical risk. So the bottom line is that the real drivers behind all this chaos are policy, risk, and a completely fractured global supply chain. It's basically a perfect storm of roadblocks hitting all at once.
Here's our global risk radar for this explainer. We're going to track these disruptions through 5 key areas. 1. Trade actions. 2. Geopolitics and logistics disruptions. 3. The Houston PVC short squeeze. 4. Feedstocks and polymer repricing. And 5. The August 1 Ex-Works revisions. Let's hit step 1.
Section 1. Trade actions, tariffs, and anti-dumping. Let's start with the immediate trade actions, acting as massive roadblocks to global polymer flows.
The sheer scale of the disruption here is just staggering. 50%. The United States is slamming a massive 50% tariff on Canadian plastics, taking effect on August 19th. Just think about that for a second. An overnight 50% penalty threatens to completely reroute North American trade. Volumes that usually cross that border frictionlessly, they're now going to be stranded or forced to find entirely new homes.
But the U.S. isn't acting alone here. This actually perfectly illustrates a much wider trend of synchronized tightening borders globally. Pakistan and Brazil are simultaneously throwing up strict anti-dumping duties of their own. So it's not just an isolated incident, it's a global policy shift. Tariffs are rising sharply, and free trade in polymers is suddenly facing some really severe hurdles.
Section 2. Geopolitics and logistics disruptions. Beyond tariffs, the actual physical movement of these materials across the ocean is facing severe geopolitical headwinds.
The physical supply chain is under tremendous strain right now. We aren't just dealing with paperwork and taxes, we're looking at severe shipping disruptions. Crucially, geopolitical risks around critical maritime choke points, like the logistics risks we're seeing near the Strait of Hormuz, are severely tightening global trade availability. When ships have to reroute or take on extreme risk premiums, all that cost and delay injects pure volatility straight into market pricing.
Section 3. The Houston PVC short squeeze. Let's look at how these massive macro disruptions are creating spectacular micro-level anomalies, especially right now in the U.S. Gulf. U.S. PVC is currently experiencing a vicious short squeeze right in Houston. We're seeing prices driven up to a stark $700 per metric ton. When supply tightens this abruptly and traders get caught off guard needing to cover their positions, well, you get these violent price spikes. $700 is a screaming signal of acute, localized stress in the system. Yet, despite this massive localized squeeze in Houston, global PVC markets are just stubbornly firm. Why? Well, Chinese operating rates are holding above 70%. Plus, we're seeing continuous, active procurement that's completely defying traditional seasonal lulls. Normally, the monsoon season slows everything down, but not this year. Buyers are out there procuring actively despite the weather, which is keeping global prices incredibly supported.
Section 4. Feedstocks and polymer repricing. All of this turbulence, the tariffs, the shipping risks, the localized squeezes, is violently flowing downstream into feedstocks and regional polymer pricing.
We're seeing some totally chaotic directional shifts in base raw materials. Ethylene is up in the EU and the US. Propylene is pushing up globally.
Meanwhile, paraxylene is taking a notable drop on the global stage. And PTA in India? It's surging up to $910 per metric ton. It's a fractured picture for sure, but the overarching theme is undeniable. Massive cost pressure is building at the very base of the supply chain.
Because of those feedstock pressures, regional polymer pricing is completely fracturing. Over in the Americas, massive polyethylene hikes are sweeping the region. We're talking August PE hikes of 5 to 10 cents per pound, and Mercosur LDPE jumping. But flip over to the Asia and Middle East side, which is heavily polypropylene focused, we're seeing free on-board Saudi PP surging up to that $990 per metric ton mark, and broader Asia is up, but that's juxtaposed against a localized price drop in China. It's just a hyper-regionalized market reacting to localized supply shocks.
Section 5. August 1. Ex-Works Revisions. Now let's turn to the ultimate validation of this entire supply-driven thesis, the final numbers from the Indian Bazaar.
Since gathering the initial data for this analysis, Indian producers have actually announced their confirmed official August 1 ex-works or factory gate revisions. And honestly, they largely validate the exact market direction we've been talking about. We're seeing across-the-board increases. Polypropylene prices have jumped by 5 rupees per kilogram. Linear low-density PE is up by 4 rupees. High-density PE is up by up to 3 rupees. And standard low-density PE is up by 2 to 4 rupees depending on the sector. PVC confirms the global firmness with a 3 rupee increase. Interestingly, PET remains totally unchanged. What this brilliantly illustrates is that these official revisions are perfectly reflecting the cost pressures, geopolitical risks, and supply-side tightening we've highlighted throughout this entire intelligence report.
A really crucial nuanced detail to note within these sweeping revisions is the performance of specific grades. Random grade polypropylene has actually managed to carve out the absolute sharpest price premiums in the current market. It just goes to show that within these macro trends, specific product availability is really dictating who has the true pricing power.
The intelligence briefing wraps up with a bit of a victory lap, noting that their outlook correctly anticipated this broad upward revision across major polymers, with the official announcements confirming continued cost-driven strength in the Indian Bazaar. And you know, it's always incredibly satisfying when the macro theory perfectly aligns with the hard, boots-on-the-ground pricing data.
So how do you actually use this intelligence moving forward? Keep your radar locked on 3 specific catalysts over the next few weeks. First, Brazil's upcoming anti-dumping ruling. Will it match the severity of the US? Second, where exactly do those displaced Canadian polymer volumes land after that massive 50% US tariff hits on August 19th? They gotta go somewhere. And finally, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. In a market explicitly not driven by demand, will these aggressive August price hikes actually survive contact with the real-world converters who have to buy them, or will the downstream simply refuse to pay? Keep watching the data. Thanks for joining this explainer.